welcome back to a brand new video. Today we're discussing a theory about Roblox Piggy, of who is TSP. Let's begin. Now, TSP has started appearing since Chapter 8 onwards, and I think TSP doesn't stand for the Super Potato, the Sister Potato, or the 7 Potions. I think TSP stands for the sibling pig, being George. And the reason I think this is because of Piracy Pig and Distorted Memory. Because Distorted Memory has the coffin with the weird tentacles coming out the side, which is obviously Piracy Pig's tentacles. They are the exact same. And at the end of Distorted Memory, in the final cutscene, we see George becoming infected. And the thing about that is, George isn't infected when we find him. And I don't think George can infected, not infected, infected and not infected. George cannot do that. Nobody else does that, so George cannot do that. So what I believe to be the reason is because the Piracy Pig, which is inside of George, is the thing that gets infected instead of George. And when George is like, oh no, it's happening again, he means the piracy is taking over him and becoming George. And the whole reason Piracy Pig isn't there to begin with is because it won't just happen. George is normal, red with 2 ears and tentacles for arms and on his back. No, it would take time, meaning George isn't infected, but he is infected, but the Piracy Pig is taking over. And by the end of the Piracy Pig's reign, George is all of a sudden not infected because the Piracy Pig hides itself. And then George goes to the hospital, which we don't see TSP in the hospital, or Chapter 7, because the thing about this is that he goes to the hospital to get cured of the Piracy Pig. Now, the Piracy Pig is cured, George is no longer anything to do with the Piracy Pig, but because the Piracy Pig was holding the infection from George, George then became an unusual sort of infected, meaning he could change back and forth without will, just at random points. And one of those first times was when the doctor, when it was all done, he attacked Barry, which is how Barry became infected. And at the end of all this, it's still slightly confusing because how did George get infected, I'll explain later. But right now we're saying why TSP, how TSP started. So at the end of Carnival, so at the end of Metro, George is on a rampage as an infected person, but the infected person has a brain, and like all the others, like how to attack you and end you. So the thing with difference with George is the George Pig can decide what he does. So he's writing these notes, recruiting the people to become one of those different infections. But George still is completely oblivious to what's going on. So at the end of Chapter 8, George is back to normal. He goes to the city to find Grandma and Ellie. But while he's there, he transforms back and attacks them and writes the TSP notes. And then he runs into Maul, he does the same there, and then that's done. But what is confusing about all of this is how is TSP in the military base with all those notes? Now, what I think is all these notes all about is because of when George left the Metro, left Carnival, he didn't go straight to the city. He went there to get help. As normal George, he was normal George still. And throughout that experience as normal George, he thought, right, I've got to go to the military base, they can sort this out. The hospital's not helped, and nothing has helped. So he goes to the outpost, and he's fine. They rest him down, he's fine. And then, as we find out, as soon as he attacks someone, we know they become infected. So he must have transformed in the military base, attacked everyone, and therefore they're all infected. He writes the notes and then scampers back to the city to find Grandma and find Ellie and then go to the mall. But the person who's watching us is George, not infected, but trying to fight the infection. So he doesn't want to go anyone to us because he doesn't want to hurt us like he's hurt everybody else. So he runs to the mall, gets infected, and then hides in that room after leaving notes about his plan, and then becomes non-infected George, who is completely oblivious to what is going on. Now, how George became infected is a bit more confusing, let's say, because Subject Zero, we still don't know who Subject Zero is, but I think George is Subject Zero. And because Mr. P is trying to find a cure for Mrs. P, who I'm going to guess is younger than Mr. P, he wants a young test subject, Subject Zero being George. And George is still quite young. He'll do it because he could be like, I'll get you more toys, I'll get you some sweets or anything like that if you test this cure. And George tests it, the Piracy Pig is the one who inhales it instead of George, and everything's fine. So then Mr. P goes and gives the thing to, he's not done testing. That's when he goes to give it to the rest of the Piggy family without everything else happening. But George, while at home, attacks whoever she is, Penny. He attacks Penny, making her infected when, by the time she leaves, she's not infected, but is about to be infected, which is why she wants nothing to do with George and carries on walking. She eventually does come back and be the Piggy in Chapter 1. And that is the whole thing about Piggy and TSP, which I am talking about in this episode. And if you haven't already, subscribe to become a mega awesome person. Chapter 12 is out on Sunday. I hope you are ready for Chapter 12, and goodbye.